Using water-based ink pads and markers to create a marbleized focal image looks great, but you can take it to the next level by embossing over it to give it dimension and shine. Let me show you the tools and products you're going to need to do this technique. To start, you're going to need a water-based ink pad and water-based markers. And I'm using the Memento Cantaloupe ink pad and 2 of the Memento markers in Ladybug and Tuxedo Black. Then you're going to need a stamp image, and I'm using the Tall Flowers from the new Springtime Silhouette Stamp TV kit. Whatever image you use, you want it to either be a chunkier image or a thicker line art image because you want to be able to do some of the marker work on it, so you need a little bit more substance. Then you're going to need a versamark pad, you're going to need an anti-static pad, and some clear embossing powder. And I'm using the Ranger Superfine Detail Powder in clear. You're also going to need a stamp-a-majig, and as you can see on my imaging sheet, I've already stamped the floral image from this stamp, and then I cleaned my stamp off very well. You want to do that first and get that out of the way before you start the technique. Now I'm going to use some of the Gina K Designs Pure Luxury 120-pound base weight cardstock. It's a nice solid cardstock, and when you're embossing, sometimes your cardstock can curl a little bit. So if you use the 120-pound weight, you won't have that happen. All right, to start out, I'm going to ink up this stamp using some of the Memento Cantaloupe ink. And I want to completely cover the stamp with this yellow. Then my next step is the thumping technique, where I'm going to use the Ladybug marker and the Tuxedo Black marker, and I'm going to tap all over the surface of this stamp. And if you remember in some of the other videos that I've done this technique on, I've told you, make sure that you turn your marker as you go so that all the lines don't go exactly the same way. I'm going to go down the stems, and then I'm going to turn the stamp and get some of that ink to go the other way. And then I'm going to add a little bit of this Tuxedo Black. I'm not going to do a lot of it, but I do want to do a little bit of the black because it really does give a nice effect. And you can see, again, I'm turning the marker as I go. And just a little bit down the stems to give that a little speckle. And now, because these markers and ink pads are water-based, some of that ink is going to dry, but we're going to reactivate the ink by breathing moist air over the surface of the ink, and that's called huffing. And I'm going to stamp that right into the center of my cardstock. Now the next step is very important. You want to make sure that you clean your stamp first. And I just have a paper towel with a little bit of water, and because this ink and marker that's on here is water-based, water will clean that off. But I don't want to tap my stamp right on my Versamark pad with all that ink color on there. So I want to make sure that that's really cleaned off. Okay. Now my next step is to ink up the stamp using the Versamark, and I want to get it nice and saturated. And then using the stamp-a-majig, I want to line that up so that I'm going to end up stamping that Versamark directly on top of the image that I've already stamped. You see how I've lined that up? And now I'm going to replace my tool there, and I'm going to stamp this on. And Versamark will stay wet and sticky a little bit longer, so you don't have to do anything once you've inked it up. as long as you're moving relatively quickly. Okay, so now I'm going to get a piece of scratch paper here, and using my clear embossing powder, I'm going to sprinkle embossing powder over that entire thing. Now actually, I should have used my anti-static pad first over the entire thing, but I'm not in a very staticky environment, so none of that embossing powder did stick. But sometimes in the drier months, that embossing powder can just stick all over your cardstock. So you usually do want to use that, but that's okay because we didn't get any sticky embossing powder anywhere. That really does create a lot of dimension and a lot of shine. You see that? Let me show you another one that I did. I used the bird stamp from the Springtime Silhouette Kit, and I did the same thing using some greens and blues and yellows. And then I actually sprinkled a little bit of glitter on it right before I heat embossed it, and the glitter kind of sunk into the embossing powder, so it's a little bit shinier. You can see when I turn it that way how much shine that has. Let me show you my finished card project. Here I've just added a nice background using the Cuttlebug embossing folder and just cutting that piece of cardstock in half on an angle. Added that to my card base and pop that image right on top. Isn't that beautiful? Embossed marble looks great on your focal image, but also try it on greeting stamps and accent stamps to create other interesting effects in your projects.